Compounding interest is often called the eighth wonder of the world. It's the idea that your money doesn't just grow on its own, but the growth itself begins to grow. Every dollar you invest earns a return, and then those returns earn their own returns. Over time, this creates exponential growth. But here's the truth most people don't realize. Compounding doesn't feel powerful when you're starting out. In the early stages, the growth is so small it almost feels like nothing is happening. The real magic of compounding only starts to reveal itself once you've built a solid base of capital. And that's where the gap begins. Why the rich seem to pull away so quickly after crossing a certain threshold, often around 100,000. Let's break it down in simple terms. Imagine you've managed to save and invest $10,000. That's a big achievement. If you earn a 7% annual return, which is around the historical average of the stock market, you'll make about $700 in growth in the first year. Now, $700 isn't bad, but it's not life-changing. It might cover a month's worth of groceries or maybe a few bills. It's nice, but it doesn't feel like wealth. Now imagine instead that you've invested $100,000. At the same 7% return, that's $7,000 in growth in the first year. That's already a noticeable difference. $7,000 might pay for several months of living expenses, a nice vacation, or it could be reinvested to keep building even faster. Suddenly, compounding feels real. The numbers are big enough to matter in your everyday life. And here's where it gets interesting. Once you pass that $100,000 mark, something shifts. The compounding starts to accelerate. The growth on your investments begins to outpace what you could realistically save just by working harder or cutting back expenses. At $200,000, 7% is $14,000 in growth. At $500,000, it's $35,000. At $1 million, it's $70,000. The same percentage return produces drastically different outcomes depending on the size of your base. And this is why the rich pull away. They're not necessarily working harder than you at that point. They're not even saving more. They've simply reached the level where their money is doing the heavy lifting. Their wealth builds on itself. Meanwhile, someone still below that threshold has to keep grinding, keep saving, and keep waiting for compounding to take over. This creates what I call the compounding gap. It's not that compounding doesn't work for smaller amounts, it does. But the impact is so small in the early years that it requires patience, discipline, and a long time horizon. That's why many people give up before they see the results. They invest a little, wait a few years, and then think, this isn't working fast enough. So they stop, cash out, or move on to something else. Meanwhile, the wealthy keep going, and once they cross $100,000, the acceleration begins. It's almost like a wealth treadmill. Below $100,000, you're walking, working hard, and not moving very fast. But once you pass that line, the treadmill speeds up. You're still walking at the same pace, but the ground beneath you is carrying you forward faster than before. That's the secret advantage of reaching critical mass in investing. Think about it like planting seeds. If you only have a handful of seeds, your harvest will be small. Even if each seed produces fruit, it won't be enough to feed you. But if you have a whole field of seeds planted, suddenly the harvest is overwhelming. The principle is the same, but the scale makes the outcome completely different. This is why the rich get richer. Not because the rules of money are different for them, but because they've reached the point where compounding changes speed. For someone still building, the compounding might add a few $100s a year. For someone wealthier, it might add thousands or tens of thousands without them lifting a finger. Now, here's the most important part. That $100,000 threshold is not just about numbers. It's about mindset. Most people never reach it. Not because it's impossible, but because they underestimate the power of consistent investing. They spend too much of what they earn, they get discouraged by slow progress, or they chase shortcuts instead of sticking to the process. But for the people who stay disciplined, who save aggressively and invest consistently, once you're past $100,000, the game changes. Every year of compounding adds more momentum. What once took years to build starts to happen in months. And then you reach another acceleration point. $500,000, then $1 million. At those levels, compounding creates more wealth in a year than most people can save in a decade. That's why it feels like the wealthy are pulling away. They're playing on a different level of the curve. But here's the good news. The curve is available to anyone. It doesn't belong only to the wealthy. The laws of compounding don't discriminate. Whether you're starting with $1,000 or $10,000, the same rules apply. The challenge is to keep going long enough to reach the point where it feels real. Let me put it another way. Imagine two people. One has $10,000 invested, the other has $100,000. Both are earning 7% per year. The first person earns $700 in growth, the second earns $7,000. It feels unfair, but if the first person keeps saving $500 a month and investing, while the second stops adding money, Eventually, the first person catches up. It might take years, but the point is discipline can beat starting position. The real danger is giving up before you reach that tipping point. That's why the compounding gap exists. It's not just about math, it's about time and patience. The wealthy can let compounding run on autopilot, but everyone else has to fuel the engine with consistent contributions until it becomes self-sustaining. So what's the takeaway? If you're below $100,000 right now, don't be discouraged by how slow it feels. This is the hard part. This is the phase where discipline matters most. You're building the foundation, brick by brick. Every dollar you add is pushing you closer to the point where compounding takes over. It may not look like much today, but over time, those small steps stack into something far bigger than you expect. This stage isn't about flashy results. It's about building habits and systems that will carry you forward when the numbers finally start working in your favor. Once you cross that line, the game shifts. The work starts paying you back in a way you can actually feel. Suddenly, the growth of your money isn't just coming from your paycheck or your side hustles. It's coming from the money itself. And that's when wealth building finally feels different. You realize your money is working harder than you are. At that point, your main job is to protect it, guide it, and make sure it keeps compounding without interruption. If you're already past $100,000, the strategy is simple. Don't stop. You don't need to reinvent the wheel or chase risky investments. You need to protect your capital, avoid unnecessary risks, and let time do the heavy lifting. The biggest mistake people make after reaching six figures is thinking they need to gamble bigger to get to the next level. But the truth is, compounding doesn't require drama. It requires patience. You don't need to hit home runs. You just need to keep getting on base over and over again. The compounding gap explains why the rich seem to build wealth faster and easier. It's not magic. It's not even about working harder. It's simply about reaching the point where money begins to grow on its own, and then staying disciplined enough to let that process keep running. The rich pull away not because they're smarter or luckier, but because they've stayed in the game long enough to cross the point where the math shifts in their favor. But here's the encouraging part. You can take the same path. It's not about privilege alone, and it's not about catching some once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. It's about saving, investing, and staying patient until you reach the tipping point. The wealthy pull away after $100,000 because compounding stops being a whisper and starts being a roar. The same can happen for you if you build consistency into your financial life and protect your progress. That's the real secret of wealth. It's not about chasing the next big thing. It's not about timing the market, and it's not about comparing yourself to others. It's about discipline multiplied by time. If you stay in the game long enough, the math will eventually tip in your favor. And the sooner you start, the sooner you'll cross that gap yourself. Every month you wait makes the climb longer. Every dollar you invest today gets extra years to compound. The rich seem to pull away, but in reality, they're just people who got started, stayed patient, and let compounding do what it does best. And if you do the same, one day you'll look back and realize that you've crossed the gap too. Not because of luck, but because you trusted the process long enough to let it work.